Today's story is one of the craziest plane emergencies that I have read, and it is about Flight 5390. Our story started on a Sunday, June 10, 1990, where there was a flight scheduled to departure for Birmingham, England, their destination, Malaga, Spain. This flight consisted of 2 pilots, 4 cabin crew members, and 81 passengers. The pilots and the crew members, they had flown together many times, but the co-pilot, it was the first time that he flew with this crew. The captain was Captain Lancaster, who was 42 years old at that time, and he had over 11,000 flight hours. The co-pilot was Alastair Atchison, who was 39 years old, and he had over 7,000 flight hours. They did all the preparations and they took up at around 8:20 in the morning, and everything was going perfectly fine. At one point, when they reached certain altitude, they decided to put the autopilot, and the pilot decided to loosen off the shoulder harness and get comfortable. Once they reached the 70,300 feet, all of a sudden there was an explosive decompression in the cabin, and the pilot kind of got sucked out of the plane. But luckily, his legs got caught in the controllers and he didn't get sucked all the way out. Now, one of the flight attendants who was working at the front, his name was Nigel, saw what happened and he rushed and grabbed his legs. But when his leg got caught in the controllers, this kind of made the autopilot disengage, and the plane started going down extremely fast. So now Nigel is trying to hold him as this rush air is blowing in his face and it's minus 20 degrees. There's like a tornado in the cabin, there's the breeze flying all around. The co-pilot is trying to gain control of the aircraft. Then the other 2 flight attendants come, and Simon tried to put the harness on himself and tried to get the legs of the pilot, and Nigel is trying to get out of the way because he's injured now. His shoulder, he had a cut from the window, and finally they move his legs where the co-pilot could get control of the situation. But he decided to keep going fast down because they couldn't breathe the air at that altitude, and they didn't have enough oxygen for everybody at the plane. So he continued descending and he's calling "Mayday, Mayday!" But with the sound of the wind, he couldn't hear people replying from the tower control. So eventually he reached the right altitude where there was breathable air, and he continued asking for help and he could hear the instructions. So he was given directions for Southampton Airport, somewhere where he has never been before, and which runway was way too small for this big airplane. He was worried because they were full of fuel. They just had taken off from the other airport, but there was nothing you can do. And the captain still, like, his head is banging to the side of the airplane, and the co-pilot is like, don't let him go, because if he does, he might land in one of the engines, and then we're gonna lose that engine and make the situation worse. So they were, one, trying to prevent him from getting completely sucked out of the plane, because that will be completely tragical. They're believing at this point that he's dead, but 2, they're trying to prevent a bigger emergency. Now, between the point where they called the Mayday to the point where they had to land, there were about 20 minutes. And the passengers were able to see what was happening. And one of the passengers actually said, "I could see a body hanging out of the window with 2 men and a woman hanging onto his legs. They were trying to stop him from being sucked out." And another passenger also said the cockpit door was blown off his hinges, and I saw the near naked pilots hanging out of the window covered in blood. So the co-pilot was trying to coordinate with the tower control for the emergency landing, and he was explaining what happened, how the window blew up and how the captain got sucked out and that he believed he was dead. So just imagine that moment where you're thinking like you have to concentrate to make sure that you save everybody else, but you think that person is dead, there's a wind tornado going all around you, it's minus 20 degrees and you're freezing, and you had to keep yourself calm and land. So that must be horrifying. But he was able to do so. So he landed about 40 minutes after they took off, somewhere around 9 o'clock in the morning. Then all the passengers were taken off through the emergency exits, and the firefighters just took Captain Lancaster through the window. So basically just went up and took him out. To everyone's amazement, he was alive. Not only did he survive, but he remembered the buffeting of the wind, meaning like the wind hitting him over and over very violently. And he also believed at one point that he was going to die, and that everything was super frantic and happened extremely fast. Better of all, thankfully, he never felt any pain during those 15 to 20 minutes from the moment the window blew up to the moment they landed. Now, besides his uniform almost being completely taken off by the force of the air, he also was bleeding from the constant banging against the side of the airplane. And in fact, when the plane landed, you can see the splatter of blood to the side of the window. He had frostbite and fractures to the thumb, elbow, and wrist. And of course, he was very traumatized. Who wouldn't? But what happened? Why did this window blow up? So during the investigation, they were able to recover the piece of window that fell out of the aircraft with most of the screws still on it. And they learned that about 27 hours before the flight, the aircraft had a routine maintenance, and in this maintenance, the windshield had been replaced. However, when they interviewed the engineer, they found out that he took out the old screws out, and he just went and tried to find one that matches. So he eyeballed it and thought that he had the same screws. And he just went back and replaced, which were about 90 screws all around the window. However, there's two things. One is that the screws that were there before were the wrong size. And the second thing is that when he tried to match the new screws, he grabbed the wrong size. 84 out of the 90 bolts that he used to secure the windscreen, the diameter was smaller than he thought by 0.026 inches, which is very, very minuscule. So if you weren't like a super expert, you might have not even noticed it. And the last four, they were too short by 0.1 inches. Now, because the screws were too small, the windshield couldn't withstand the force of the air pressure difference between the cabin and the outside, and that's what caused the explosive decompression. The captain was taken to the hospital, and he thanks the crew members, saying that they were magnificent, and if it wasn't for them, he wouldn't be there. And only 5 months after this accident, Lancaster returned to work as a pilot. But you know what is the craziest part about this flight, besides the captain hanging for dear life outside the aircraft? Is the 77 out of the 81 passengers just took another flight and went to Malaga like nothing happened. Can you imagine the stories they told to their family and friends? Let me know in the comments.